Hello and welcome to the Growth Workshop podcast with me, Matt Best, and my co-host, Jonny Adams.
Hello.
It's so fantastic to be doing one of these in person, Jonny. I'm just so grateful to all of our listeners by supporting our podcast, have enabled us to come and do one of these vodcasts. There we go. That's brand new. You heard it here first. But more importantly, we are thrilled to have Charlotte Smith join us today on the Growth Workshop podcast. So Charlotte, thank you so much for joining us.
Thrilled to be here on this rainy morning, but it's worth it. Look at this setting. Look at you guys with your half zip up tops. I do feel like I'm being interviewed by CIPD. I have paid my tax bill, I assure you. But
Sure.
I have. But delighted. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, brilliant. Well, look, we're thrilled to have you. And as someone who's an experienced people manager specializing in talent strategies and currently working with Trilogy International, we're just really excited to get into the conversation with you today on really how to drive business growth through a client-centric leadership. And I think that's going to be a super interesting area for us to open up the discussion on. So yeah, again, thank you so much for taking the time today. I know you know Jonny from past, so maybe Jonny, over to you. Where did you guys meet?
So we've got a great friendship through friends of a friend. So not only that, Charlotte, obviously you've been a client of SBR as well in the past. So some of our friends from home, we've got mutual friends, which is how we know each other. But also Charlotte, from being a client, we also know each other through that as well. So thank you, Charlotte, for coming. Really great to see you. I'm really curious, though, just to sort of kick things off, understand a little bit more about your history, your experience within work. What have you been doing over the last number of years? I'm not going to name those years just because that wouldn't be fair. But give us a little bit of background about you.
It sure does. I mean, I don't mind naming the years, right? But I got into the recruitment sector way back when, so 2005. There we go. It's giving it away. So I started my career as a junior recruitment consultant. I joined the typical S3 bubble that was the vogue of the recruitment industry back then. I wouldn't change it for the world. I mean, there were some incredible stories. There was some incredible hardships and ways of working, but it was a rugged way to be dragged into this industry. But it absolutely gave me all of the competencies and the beliefs that I think have stood the test of time. Throughout that process, I have gone full cycle from biller team leader. I did a good stint post 2008 crash, working more in a talent acquisition role, working on kind of resource and strategic resourcing strategies for big energy and utilities back then. And around about the time that I decided that I wanted to be a mum, and that was something that I was committed to, was the time that I thought, okay, it is time to hang those billing gloves up. And that's a personal choice. That's not to say that has to be done because you want to be a mum, for any aspirational young ladies listening to this and want to go down that path. But it was something that I have always felt passionate about. I remember going to the Carnaby Street training facilities that S3 had back then and working with the trainers and the coaches. And I remember right from day dot, that was something that I want to do. I really wanted to help and to coach others. I think right back from my sporting kind of, grew up like going to all the athletics clubs, netball clubs, getting involved with coaching other teams. I think I've always had that kind of coach in me. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. That felt like the timing was there for me to do that.
I'm curious, what type of coach were you? Were you, an autocratic coach, or were you a bit more relaxed? How did you sort of go about that?
Well, I was a child. I was a teenager. So, this is many, many moons ago. But I think I like to win the hearts and minds of people. And I like to feel like I would never ask somebody to do something I wouldn't be prepared to do myself as well. And I like to be able to coach from experience, but of course have had to go through the journey of understanding how to be a professional coach, in order to ensure that people can bring the best out of themselves, as you guys understand and know very well. Back in the day, SBR as a business was one of those defining moments in training that actually really helped me understand how to turn that funnel round and get your sales professionals to understand the lens that they're looking down and therefore to be more successful. So wrapping that up, recruiter, yes, I am, and I'm proud of it. Started nearly 2 decades ago, did about 8 to 9 years billing, team leading, and then have ever since been in a people manager, L&D, kind of operational directorship capacity, and I love it.
Amazing. Well, we have many recruitment clients, and I have to say, over the last couple of months, if not 12 months, it's been a bit of a challenge out there for recruiters and businesses in recruitment. And I think one of those organisations, when things are going really well, the market's on the up. When things are not going so well, you actually probably know a little bit more about the macro conditions that are ongoing. So if there's anyone that knows, you've probably seen the ebbs and the flows of what growth is like within business, and obviously your personal side as well. In terms of today's conversation, as we spoke about, this is all about the Growth Workshop podcast, and we're really going to dig deep on leadership and what that means to create a customer-centric sort of business, and how you've helped that moving forward. But before that, what we're really curious to understand is that for you as an individual, and you spoke about your family there, which was amazing. You spoke about your career, which was really interesting. But when we think about growth, there's normally in most people's lives, and I think back to when people are children or when they're going through their career, there's like a sort of a growth spurt as such, that moment where when we were growing, when we were younger and we were moving up and getting bigger. But actually in our career, what was that moment that you can think about, or that milestone where you had a growth spurt and that really sort of got you thinking? Is there anything like that?
It's so easy to answer that. It's the day that I came back from maternity leave.
Interesting.
So for me, I really feel like my career transcended when I came back after being a mum. I was superhuman. I created another person. I brought that person into the world. I reared them healthily. I brought them through, and I think you're just about to go through that, Jonny, as well. So I felt incredibly confident. Now, that's not to dismiss all of the kind of maternal worries and anxieties that you have coming back into quite a full-on workspace. It takes a hot minute, but I felt at that moment, if I was to be leaving that house in the morning, dropping my child off at nursery and leaving him all day, it had to mean something.
Amazing, yeah.
And I had to really ensure that I wanted to lead by the front by example. I've got a little boy, and I wanted him to think that his mum was a rock star. So for me, that's where, just things started to click for me in a new role as well, because I was really trying to pioneer what learning and development was back then. And this was 11 years ago. So it is so much more commonly discussed nowadays. But back then you had to fight for budget. You had to justify your cost base, right? Yeah. And that was also quite hard, because you go from, I can justify my cost base. I can give you teams with £1 million P&Ls. I can personally produce business with my own effort. So then to really try and work in an L&D capacity with what was back then quite an old school way of thinking, to go, I'm really going to make this work, and I'm not just going to make this work, I'm going to pioneer this. I'm going to own the shit out of this and become one of the most successful L&D professionals in recruitment. And the last 10 years have been exceptional. There's been some hard parts. I mean, I hate or even mentioning COVID, but that was challenging, and that actually I had to go through redundancy at that phase after being with a business for 11 years. That was excruciating at the time. Looking back on that was actually wonderful, because that's caused me to gain further experiences with some wonderful businesses, and enabled me to keep pushing my career forward. But absolutely, motherhood was a defining moment for me. Yeah. And I look back at every career aspect that I've achieved, thought, and even just felt in myself. Yeah. It has been since coming back from having my son.
Well, I've got 2 role models sitting in front of me here that have been on parenthood way ahead of me. And listening to that has probably given me a few goosebumps. And it's great that I'm sitting here with both of you. Just to sort of anchor around the conversation today, over the last number of months, we've found a really hot topic that's going on with all of the amazing guests that we've had, all about customer centricity. And, in hard markets, in difficult markets in business, having a really good anchor around customer centricity can really help you retain and grow key clients and continue to keep the lights on as such. And whatever role you play, people-centered learning and development, you're as crucial as anyone else to creating that. But just as a bit of preamble and as a frame for today, before we get into some of the chunky topics, I'm really curious. If you think about the topic today, we're thinking about driving business growth through customer-centric leadership and what those strategies are to creating that. And we're really emphasizing the point around the leadership part to customer centricity. So why do you think leadership is so important towards customer centricity? Could you describe a little bit around that for us?
I think it's key to take one step back on that. So every business, regardless of your output profession, whether it's selling stocks and shares, double glazing, or recruitment services, there will be a moment where a board will sit down and go, this is what we have achieved, this is what we haven't achieved, and this is what we would like to achieve. So I think me and you have joked over the years, Jonny, like people love a statement, don't they? They love throwing something out there to say, this is what we are going to do. Great, full stop. The and what moment is the leadership team. And the reason that's an and what moment is because if you can't gear your leadership team to drive your people to achieve that, then what's the point? Don't go in that boardroom and blueprint that strategy in the first place, particularly within recruitment services. And I know that's incredibly relatable to a lot of the other customers that will be listening to this show, but you can have the best ideas, but if you don't know how to mobilize that, you're going to come unstuck every single time. So from a leadership perspective, you have to have the right people around you to drive that strategy and achieve that from a customer point of view. Yes, but that again will have a pin in it. How is that leadership team driving the people, the foot soldiers, to deliver that strategy actually should take up the market share of your conversation. So if there is a 2-hour board meet to define your strategy for coming years and months, 10% of that time should be allocated to the goal. 90% of that time should be then used to discuss the how.
And that weight that you've just given there, 10 to 90, has that come from experience? Is that something that you believe in? Like, give that shape, because one of the things that we like to do on this is, like any book or podcast, I'm a pop-up book guy, that, I write pictures. But the important part is,
Wally?
Do you know those books that you can actually have like a framework that you do stuff in? So you've just given a nice little idea or concept, 10-90. Where does that come from? Does that come from experience or
Definitely come from experience. Many moons ago, I was given one of those Christmas, like crappy Christmas presents you get where you press the buzzer and it goes bullshit, right? So I don't know whether it's my upbringing. I don't know whether it's because I've been in recruitment since a very young age, that I just can listen to people kind of not fathom, that's the wrong word, but come up with these good concepts and ideas and then just wishy-washy their way to execution. And I call bullshit. I'm like, we're not gonna get this done. I'm also, think back to my defining moment, don't waste my time. If I'm gonna spend a day with you and we're gonna drive this business forward, if I'm with you, I'm not at home. So let's make this work. Let's get stuff done. So it definitely does come from experience. But of course, I've had some fantastic mentors over the year that have helped us understand the how so much more. Well, you've got your how and your why versus your what, right? So it's definitely a mixture of both. I'm not pioneering that as a strategy. I just really believe it, and I'm not scared to stick up for it. If I think the leadership team that I'm working with are veering off course and not actually labeling and funneling a way for us to actually produce that, and potentially because I am in a people role, because I have to go back and get stuff done via people. So I need to know what those layers are. So it's incredibly easy to navigate and control, but also prove ROI, which I have to do all the time. So if I can do that with step 1 equals step 2 equals step 3 equals before we're ding, ding, we did it, then I can do my job much more effectively.
It's so fascinating. You talk about the people element, and you talk about having the leadership team on the journey. I think it's really important to remember why leadership is there. I was at a conference recently talking about like levers in sales enablement and how you can really scale enabling a team. And it's sort of it's strange to think that the first point of call would be the focusing on individual practitioners or individual contributors when you think if we need to scale something and we need to get something out there, what if leaders aren't coaching and supporting that kind of initiative, what is their job? What are they doing?
Yeah, and I get it. Phase one is contributors for businesses, particularly in the recruitment
Yeah.
world. Think how many kind of startups there are out there and people that have built well and then wanted to go and do it themselves, right? If you look at phase one of that, you do need to get those contributors because they will pay the bills. You can't
Yeah.
ignore that.
Yeah.
And I think I have to work really hard as a people professional because I get it. Like there are people that are exceptional billers and quite frankly, they pay my wages too, right? So I think a business needs that.
Yeah.
You have to learn how to harness that superpower that they have. And you have to get very good at spotting whether somebody can therefore lead from the front, as I said before, or they just need to just do. And then you need to better equip the people leaders around you to be able to deliver a strategy, which is usually phase two, phase three, phase four of a business that wants to scale via headcount. And they usually want to do that because, of course, they want to see that bottom number grow. And so therefore you have to pay attention to both in equal measure. But again, you just call it out. Just call it for what it is. Don't force a round peg into a square hole and work hard to ensure that everybody's considered level.
Yeah. And I guess that's what I was trying to sort of say there was around that kind of leverage point, right? And so, yeah, absolutely right. It's enabling those people, but just seeing the leadership team as your ability to scale that, right? As being one person or even a small team trying to get around all of those individual contributors and harness that is a really challenging thing to do. So actually you get not infinite, but you get significant scale by saying, if we can not even isolate, but if we can say we've got this leadership team, people leaders, how to help them get the most out of their people, how to help them really help their individual contributors understand the importance of being client-centric, for example, if that's what's being driven across the business. So yeah, I think
more.
So yeah, and I think that's reflecting on this particular conference that I referenced. I think it was a light bulb for so many people around the room, and you just think that felt quite shocking to me because I was just thinking, well, surely that's fairly obvious.
Yeah, people love the numbers, right? The pounds, the euros, the dollars. Very rarely, and particularly in my industry, there are definitely other sectors that are way better than this, but very rarely do they actually do the dissection of how did we get there, right? How did that happen? Because I've worked with some great leaders and they're like, oh, we probably need you because we've got a bit lucky. And to get to that next level of growth, we need to mobilize our people and our leadership team in the right ways. And I'm like, nobody gets that lucky. There is a way. There is a list of ingredients here that have been put together quite nicely. So for any of my leadership professionals, people professionals that are listening to this pod, like, take the time to dissect the good before you go into any leadership team looking for instant gaps that you can correct, because you don't need to come in like a mood hoover and instantly go into you're not doing this, you're not doing that. Actually really focus on what has gone really, really well, how much of that will get you to the next goals around that customer-centric strategy that you are looking to implement, and then what's missing, because it doesn't always have to be hard work. It doesn't. There is so much joy in what we do. So celebrate what was good, actually construct the lucky, and enable your leadership team to view that, and then they'll go, okay, now we understand our step 1, step 2, step 3. We didn't realize we were doing that every single time because we were just coming in and doing as all good billing professionals do. They just don't think, it's unconscious. So our job is to then unravel that, create a formula and replicate that, and then you've got a scalable business.
Yeah. And you talk about the formula, and a couple of times in there, Charlotte, you've mentioned, the data points and return on investment. All these things require real focus on KPIs and really understanding the metrics that sit behind this. And I know from previous conversations we've had, that's really sort of sits at the heart of this.
Yeah.
But how do you balance that with the people side of things? How have you been successfully able to say, actually, how do we maintain a client-centric or customer-centric approach with but still kind of focus on the KPIs? And I guess just to clarify what I mean there, we know that you can do it twice, but it is a bit of a juggling act. If you're an individual contributor or a leader and you're like, we're laser focused in on these metrics, how do you remember that you've still got a client to serve at the other end?
Yeah. So first of all, you have to look for the method that achieved the positive results in the first place. So data is key to that, because otherwise you've got no proof of concept. Now, typically with salespeople, you are often working with, good old prism chart, right? You're often working with either highly analytical or highly dominant professionals that either need to race to the finish line or they need to scrutinize how you got to the finish line in the first place. So a lot of my job is proving, look, see, this is how we did it. So data is really key with that, and the use of technology and decent CRMs that are able to give you analytical tools to be able to do that has been absolutely key. Whenever I've considered an employment opportunity, I have never entertained a company that has got a rubbish CRM and a rubbish way of looking at the analytics, because I just don't know where I could start with that. I can't create a blueprint for us to be able to drive the right behaviors. And the reason I want to drive the right behaviors is because I am driven by a customer-centric approach always, because without our customers and without happy customers, we won't produce the sales. Without happy customers, they don't pay their bills. So there's front office and back office issues aligned to ensuring that your customer-centric approach is really on point. So from a KPI perspective, you prove the method. You go and hunt out what really works. And then you have to then take it back one step before that and go, okay, well, now we know what works. We can't just diagnose. We can't just say, do X amount of this, X amount of that. You have to really train the methodology behind that. So there is almost method and mindset that really needs to come into any type of people/leadership strategy to achieve a truly client-centric approach. Because, as an example, if you said...
I was going to ask for an example.
Yeah.
This is where the gold dust comes out, so come on.
Get your pen and paper out, everybody. So the example being within my world, right? We're looking for successful conversations, or I call them nice no's. So nice no's with potential customers. And the reason they're a nice no is because we have been customer centric. We've rang somebody with a truly on point value proposition. We're not wasting their time. We're not ringing to just introduce ourselves. We have rang because we are subject matter experts in what we do. We think there's an element of some decent timing involved. So they probably do need to know about us at that point, or may need to know about us at some point in the close future. And as a result, we're aligned and we can start that kind of cadence in order to be able to try and win that person over and win the business, right? Joy. That's what we're looking for as recruitment professionals. And I'm sure that funnel is relatable to other sales funnels as well, right?
Definitely.
So the target is therefore, how many BD calls are you doing, right? You can put that on a dashboard. You can produce reports around that. You can put a number out there, which is, the same as an ingredients list. 250 grams of self-raising flour versus 25 BD calls in a week should be able to produce you a decent ratio, etc., etc. So then the step back before that is the training. It's the why, it's the how, it's, taking the time to nurture and teach somebody what a decent value proposition is. The step back before that, for my business in particular, is we call it market segmentation. So it's, don't be a generalist. If you truly want to make your customers happy, you will provide them something that is hard to find from their talent acquisition teams, from just posting their own adverts. So you have to truly own your market. You can't cop out of being a subject matter expert. That's training, that's leadership. So again, I can't, as the people professional, I can't sit with my banking team and go, right, where's the next kind of big change and transformations within the banking world? I have to work very closely with our associate directors to understand that, and we have to leverage each other's skills. They have to tell me in which direction to point their people because they understand the commercial gain from that.
I'm really curious. I'm sorry to butt in on your great explanation because I'm loving this framework. It reminds me about 2 years ago we were working with a unicorn, so a hugely profitable and hyper growth organisation. Not a unicorn as in a company with in terms of the yes. But the important part there, as I was referencing, is we were working with a number of SDRs and AEs in this particular. They were selling human resource software. And when we were talking to that individual to differentiate themselves, or that business to differentiate themselves within the marketplace, I just challenged and asked a question. It resonates a little bit of what you're saying. I said, if you're selling HR software to your HR persona, which is essentially your buying center, how many of you have picked up the latest HR magazine? How many of you picked up the latest HR newsletter? How many of you have rang around your network and called up a HR professional and understood exactly what they do for a day-to-day job? And we work with over 100 of their sales development representatives. Zero. So does that resonate with you wherever you've been
100%.
without naming names? But how would you coach or train on that particular piece? I think it's aligning a little bit to what you're saying.
Yeah, it's one of the,
segmentation.
so when I spoke about as a people professional, when you first on board with a business, one of the first kind of health checks I do is tell me about your market. Where are the parameters to that market, and what strategies or what key things do you have in play to ensure that you are becoming a brand within that market? What does your shop window say, as an example, right? So LinkedIn, love it or hate it, right? Love it or hate what you see on those feeds. You're still looking.
I watch your
right?
feed. Yep.
Well, hopefully you like my feed.
I'm not a lurker. I am a liker and a commenter. You know that.
You are. It's when my old colleagues go, I really enjoyed that. I was like, where was the like? Where was the support?
Where's the clickbait? Where's the clickbait?
Why don't you reshare?
Exactly, right? So yeah, you have to kind of get that. What do you do? Great. How are you becoming a kind of spearhead subject matter expert in that? And I work with
Charlotte,
right?
what do you do? Because I think about a method actor, right? And you think about those method actors that spend 9 months of being that person. And if you want to be an expert and you want to grow into that role and you're leading this customer-centric approach through the leadership function, surely businesses need to tell Matt, get out there. You're selling into the financial service industry. How many people have you spoken to? How much do you truly know about that? Isn't there something that's missing in the market that we don't do enough of that?
100%. And it's terrible in my market because it's often a junior model where you hire 20-year-olds that know how to use TikTok more than they do LinkedIn. But that's therefore showing my age because I don't know how to use TikTok and I know how to use LinkedIn. But it's really challenging, but it's a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
You absolutely cannot give up on the fundamentals. And as a training professional, as a business coach, and as an operational director, well, it's right back at the grassroots. If I don't have the right seeds to plant in the first place, I am not going to get the harvest that I want. So it cannot be ignored. It cannot be understated. And you have to work really, really hard at getting that right in the first place.
Do you think there's just on that point of, do you think there's a gap in the how? I wonder if there's, you say it's just a junior model. You come in and you've got to go sell, you've got to go find people in banking. How? Do you think, because I think quite often the clients, Jonny, that we work with, but some of the stuff that we just observe as well in the market is you've got this, okay, I know what I need to do. This is my target, and then we kind of walk off. We go, right, but how?
Yeah.
Do you think is that the sort of, especially in those more junior models, and that feels like a real challenge for those leaders in that space where the business is saying, let's go in this direction. This is great. We're going to have a client-centric approach to the way that we win work, the way that we serve our clients, great. By the time it lands on the desk of a junior person who's had their feet under the desk for less than 5 years, how does that translate?
Well, the how piece, again, if we talk about scaling something back, right? So what you just discussed is, all businesses' pain points. We want to go from A to B and move ourselves forward. How, which we've touched on some of the methods and the data-driven behaviors and ensuring that the training is really strong behind that. Even one step before that with your how is, well, what's the profile of the person that we need to hire to ensure that we can actually deliver that? No one does that. No one sits there and blueprints that this is the type of experience, competence, and key traits that we are therefore going to interview to ensure that we can deliver this strategy. It doesn't connect even right back before that. If I said to half of the leadership teams within the square mile of bank where my Trilogy offices are based, have you and your sales leaders sat down and mapped the target profile of the person that you want to hire into your team formally? Again, minimal to none, right? So that's an easy thing that you could apply to your leadership team to go, okay, we know what we want to do. We know phase one of how we want to achieve that. Okay, how and who are we going to hire to deliver that? And what are our non-negotiables around that? Because again, within any sales professional, there is high turnover, right?
Yep.
Is that the fault of the person that got offered the job, or is that the fault of the business that didn't take the time to ensure that they were hiring the right people for the job?
I massively advocate what you're saying. One of the things that we train and teach is that whenever recruitment, which is recruiting individuals into your organisation, and I know we're talking about recruitment, probably supporting other businesses, but is it about 5x, 6x the cost of a mishire at the moment? And most organisations, when they make a mishire, they always go, well, they weren't good enough anyway, and then they point a finger at them. But we always say, well, how many fingers are pointing back at you? And there's always the three that are pointing back at you, which is important to actually understand. It's probably the way that you've hired and ill practice and focus. And that comes on to like the next question, really. And we're talking about the importance of leadership to drive that, customer-centric approach. But when we think about that and then wrapping around a cultural element towards it, you're alluding to some of those practices and principles. I love the fact that you talk about the why, the what, the when, and you were challenging a bit there, Matt, about the how, and you've come up with some great frameworks. But from your experience, how do you sort of build the culture of a customer-centric approach through the leadership? Remember, that's the lens that we want to talk about. But how do you build that culture in an organisation from your role?
Yeah, so I really encourage a lot of involvement at all client touch stages. So to ensure that the next generation of biller leader that's coming through the ranks actually is really owning that and going through that process with the leadership team. I also think the key component there is you're giving the said leader, the opportunity to see where their current consultant is from a skills perspective, to ensure that they're delivering the right type of communication and value proposition and question deck and coming away with the right outcomes from those meetings. I know that sounds very, very simple, but that is customer centric, because we're just ensuring that every time we touch a customer, we're doing it to the best of our ability. But the reason why I put a people spin on that is we're ensuring that we're showing and we're leading rather than telling. So I think that's really, really key. So that's a very simple thing, is just always be there for those touch points. No matter how small, there is something that you can pick out on that. And I'm really blessed with a fantastic team at Trilogy. They're so hands-on with their customers. So they're very involved, and as a result are able to scale customers on a global setting, win whole programs of work, etc. I think in the recruitment sector, that's been another really fantastic change of mindset, which I've learned by being part of the leadership team at Trilogy, which is we really adopt our statement of work models.
Okay.
And the reason that has that kind of leader customer-centric approach is because we're not just going in and saying, can we help you with a couple of program managers? We're going, let's own it together. Let's deliver this whole program together. and actually really go on that journey. We'll take some of the reporting away from you. So we've actually made the decision to hire some PMOs into our business whose skill set is completely aligned to that. And that is an exact example of being customer centric in our approach. There is something to gain from both parties, of course, but if you're dealing with the typical CTO, or if you're dealing with the typical director of change or digital transformation director, do they want to deal with multiple contingent agents? Or do they want to actually invest in a midweight? So we're not a consultancy. We're not going to win your £30 million projects because, quite frankly, you don't have them either. You just want to deliver a couple of key things. We can partner on that. There'll be more touch. There'll be more respect and responsibility in mutual spades. And as such, we win as a business. And we drive those numbers up by winning the whole project. And the customer's much happier as a result of it.
So just with the point of view of you describing how Trilogy is set up, I really think those are some phenomenal points. The fact that you're working together with the client to create that customer set. And Matt, we've heard that from other guests in the past, which is phenomenal. Just a brief response and summary on this point. When it hasn't worked, what does it look like? But I want to know what does the feeling feel like when there's a lack of leadership that's really binding around that customer centric? I would imagine in your illustrious career you might have seen when it hasn't worked that well. But what's the feeling like in an organization when it doesn't work so well?
Well, firstly, it hasn't worked because the leadership have driven a quick result rather than a meaningful long-term result. So they've pushed a number, they've pushed a meeting, they've pushed a deal, they've pushed the rates up too much in the deal, and they haven't thought about the long-term client relationship that they can have by that. So that haste, that speed, that impatience, and therefore naivety has lost customers and results. That then creates that blame culture. I think
finger pointing everywhere, right?
100%. It's like that Spider-Man meme that you see where they're all pointing and blaming each other for a lack of. And then what happens is leadership panic. Then what happens is they start looking at KPIs. Then what happens is they start looking at working from home versus coming into the office. Blaming the hiring, blaming the people person, because I train them. So if they're not all A grade consultants,
it's Charlotte's fault.
It is absolutely always my fault. It's the same at home.
Same at home.
It's the same at home.
Oh, mum.
So the reality is it create. I think that the biggest thing that I can see is where people then try and island off their own strategies. So I remember the biggest red flags that I've had with just interviewing other businesses is we do it our way. We don't do it the same as them, or we it's different for us. Come on now, you're not driving each other forward, and then that actually doesn't mean if you're protecting or what you perceive to be the right way over another team in your business, you're not a succinct business. And I very much doubt you have a customer centric leadership team as a result of that.
It's that tying together, knitting together, the everybody rowing the boat in the same direction, right? And no one's kind of fighting. And it's so great to hear that example, Charlotte. Thank you for sharing. I know our audience will really appreciate that and think maybe see some of that in their own organizations. Something you said just previously, and I think that was particularly interesting, or that sort of jumped out for me, is how what you're doing with your business and how you're enabling your business is to take that KPI data focus and actually carry it into those client partnerships as well. You talk about having a PMO and actually let's get wrapped around the same metrics. So let's align your metrics with our goals so that everything is collected. I mean, that's got to be the North Star of client centricity, right?
Yeah, 100%. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that it's an easy journey. And so if I think back over the last 12 months, because I've only been part of the leadership team of Trilogy for 12 months, and it's been fantastic. And this business is absolutely home for me. The stage one is because you are talking data, people just get triggered. Data means KPIs. KPIs means KPI management. Leadership go, God, this bloody bird has joined our business and she's making us look at all these data points. We're losing what we were. We weren't this
We're losing
data
our
driven.
culture. This isn't our
100%.
culture.
That's so 2012, by the way. It's changed. We're not in that.
I know,
environment, but it's
right?
still-
We're not that business. We're not that business. So I spoke about the hearts and minds. It does take a minute, and these are the most open-minded professionals that I've worked with in a long time, right? They're really open to it. They really wanted it. But then when you ask somebody to change, they're like, oh, no, that's not for us. So it did take a minute. So you do have to start in the trenches a little bit, but you have to really commit and own it. With any change methodology, right? You've kind of got those combative months where it's like can't see it, can't see it, can't see it. What we really work together with as a leadership team, though, and we're a smaller business, right? So it is a bit easier for us to do. We're sort of between 60 70 heads based across kind of 3 different locations. We're European, we're UK, we're US, so they're the kind of cultural aspects with that to deal with as well. But we really, really shouted about the small stuff because we've got some people in our business that achieve incredible stuff. Like I've never worked with a business that has got so many £1 million, dollar, euro a year billers, right? And I think that's testament to the method. So when I dissected what was the Trilogy way, it was customer centric. It was we work incredibly hard. We don't treat people as a client and we don't treat people as a candidate. We work incredibly hard to network with key figureheads in our market. So we stay in our lane. We're contract recruiters, the exception of the US, right? We're contract recruiters. We don't touch perm. So we have boundaries and we won't go out of that. You know, we have customers that we work with that spend millions of pounds a year in perm hiring. It could be so easy to go, we'll do that. No, we are the contract recruiters. That's what people come to us for. And as a result, we deliver what we say we can deliver. And I think if you're sat here as a leader putting together your strategy and you think diversifying your offering with your current leadership team, because of course you can hire in a great person that can help you branch off, but if you're trying to diversify your offering and your value to your customers and you have no weight behind that, that's a not customer centric decision. That's greedy. You will fail. Your customers won't enjoy that. And you'll lose what you were good at in the first place, right? So I've really enjoyed that, but I've had to demonstrate that. So yes, all of these incredible people that have been here since you were running it out of a shoebox. And I fully appreciate we now have a CRM and I'm showing you data and dashboards and I'm sending around league charts and you hate it. But now we're at a point where we're like, well, we've built the base level funnel. We've got everybody really aligned to their markets. We've worked on the basics and we've really pushed that. And I used key people in our business to help me support those messages. I found my business champions to help me with that. I took extra time to dissect the rationale, the reasoning, and the why, so they knew where I was coming from. I then got them to do a bit of training with me to add weight. So I wasn't just this person that joined the business and they were like, who's this dizzy bird with the red lip telling us to do more calls because it's going to achieve this. And then now we're at the end of funnel stuff. You know, we're really driving at the moment, you know, how many people we're meeting, how many times it takes for you to meet somebody for you to then gain business, and then how we can work on ensuring that the level of business that we're bringing in is accurate to our wheelhouse, and do our talent pools match that so we can deliver that with great speed to hire.
End-to-end strategy.
Mic drop.
And the journey. Drop the mic. And I think that's a fantastic place for us to end the conversation today, Charlotte. Thank you so much. And I think just for the audience today, some absolute gold dust in there. And I know obviously we've been talking in the context of a recruitment business, but there's so much of this that is relevant, as you said, way beyond recruitment businesses, and just having eyes on all of those really, really important things and not trying to boil the ocean. I think one of the things you said right towards the end there was about taking time, right? So taking time to win a deal, but also taking time to invoke change within the business is clearly something you've done to great success, and is starting to, and taking those difficult personalities on the journey with you along the way as well. So on behalf of Jonny and I, Charlotte, thank you so much for joining us today. We've thoroughly enjoyed it. Fantastic insight. And to our listeners, I'm sure you're going to get a huge amount from this conversation. So thank you.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Charlotte.